Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. And if you've ever wanted to learn how to learn and transform your life, then do we have the Mindshift show for you. Today I'll be talking with Dr. Barbara Oakley, best-selling author and the teacher of the most popular online course in the world, Learn How to Learn. She's a TED Talker extraordinaire and the author of a fascinating new book on transforming your mind and your life, Mindshift. And that's just what I want to talk with her about today, about breaking through obstacles to learning and discovering your hidden potential. That, plus we'll talk about flunking algebra, learning Russian, romance at the South Pole, tales from a Russian trawler, riding horses bareback after school, making mooks in the basement, and why, if you know too much, it's time to kill you. Gotcha. So welcome to the show, Barb. Are you ready to shine?
Michael, I am ready to shine.
Woohoo! All right, so before we dive right into things, and we know from talking even beforehand, we have way too much fun stuff to talk about today, but how did you end up on a Russian trawler on the Bering Sea?
Well, let's see. I ended up there a little bit more tipsy than I should have on multiple occasions. But it was just, there's not a lot of jobs that you could do if your sole professional expertise is the ability to speak Russian. Mm-hmm. And that was one of the few jobs. There was a half Soviet, half American-owned company, and I worked as a translator. So my job was basically the Americans would come yelling at me on the radio, hey, guess, with unprintable words saying, to the effect of slow the boat down. And I would turn to Yuri Vasilievich and say, Yuri, would you please slow the boat down? And,
very diplomatic.
Yes, it was a fun experience, but your liver could only take so much of it.
I could see that. So if we go back from there, let's go way on back to when you were in school, growing up, maybe your early years. Were you always great in school?
Yeah. Oh, well, no. I was actually pretty much a miserable math and science student. Mm-hmm. I absolutely hated it because I grew up moving all over the place. My dad was in the military, and I just, when I was around 7 years old, we moved, and they were suddenly far ahead of me in the multiplication table, and I was just like, I can't do this stuff. And so I flunked my way through elementary, middle, and high school math and science, which is kind of funny because I'm now a professor of engineering. So talk about reinventing yourself. It can be done.
Woohoo! And so you would get home from school, and if I understood right, your dad liked to live on the fringes between suburbia and we'll call it the outback. And so you would probably throw down your books, jump on the horse, and away you would go.
That's right. He was a veterinarian. And so even though we moved a lot, he was oftentimes the base veterinarian. And he'd go in and do that. But we just loved horses. And so I'd go out riding after school every day. I just thought all kids did that kind of thing. And it was just fun and all get out. I didn't care about books or anything like that. And I didn't have to. I could just have a lot of fun going out and just kind of messing around out in the woods and stuff with my horse.
I love it. And that is it's actually, if we talk about the brain, such a powerful tool for kids of not only you've got locomotion and you've got exercise going on, but you're mapping your environment. You're creating one heck of a mind map going on inside of you. And you're actually making some really strong neurological connections in there.
That is very true. When I wasn't like getting bucked off against trees and stuff like that and the like, but I think it's valuable for kids to have some free time. Mm-hmm. And so when our own children were growing up, I really tried to, I didn't want to be a tiger mom, but on the other hand, I didn't want to be completely open, and so I decided I could do one single thing for my kids that I could sort of insist that they do, mm-hmm. even if they didn't want to, and that was to do 20 minutes of math through, there was a program called Kumon, which is around a lot. Now online you can find a similar sort of updated version called Smartic, SMARTICK, but what that 20 minutes of math did a day was just helped give them a little bit of extra practice. So math seemed comfortable and nice for them. And so you know what they say to me nowadays? They say, so why didn't you push us to do music and dance and the rest of those things too?
Oh no, can't win.
But they're really happy, and they turned out great. They've got good careers, and they're really fantastic.
And how old are they?
They're now 28 and 26. So one is a doctor, and the other is a photojournalist.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
So let's go back to you. When you left high school, your path was interesting.
Well, it was unexpected. Let's put it this way. At first, it was very expected. I mean, since I hated math and science, couldn't do it. But one thing I did want to do was my family had, they were resolutely monolingual, and you can guess what language they spoke. And I just thought, wow, wouldn't it be so incredible to learn a new language, just learn any other different language, actually be able to think in a different language. I just thought that would be the coolest thing. And that was the only thing that really interested me as a career path, which I didn't realize it at the time. It doesn't leave you a lot of options necessarily, but I ended up. There was a way I could learn language for free, and that was to enlist in the Army and go to the Defense Language Institute. So that's what I did. My father said, "You'll learn a lot."
How did you have the mindset that said, I'm not good at math, I'm not good at science, I have no background in learning any other language, let's learn languages?
In high school, I was able to take you take some courses on language, like French and some German, and I could do okay at those. And I actually took a tiny bit of Russian in this one high school that I was at. And it was enough to say, well, maybe you could be successful in studying a different language. And also, I just had this peculiar characteristic where I really liked to repeat things that I heard. Like if I heard a sound or an interesting phrase, it was just fun for me to kind of sit around and see if I could make that sound come out of my mouth. And, it's almost like I have a little bit of jackdaw in me, some kind of a bird that just likes, I'd like to mimic that. And it doesn't mean I understand anything, but just it's kind of a fun exercise. So where some people would do crossword puzzles, I would kind of sit and see if I could mimic things. And so I think that also helped me to think, well, maybe I could at least fake the accent.
So you faked it while you learned Russian. You ended up on Russian trawlers. How did you end up then as a radio operator in the South Pole?
Oh, my brother had been working for ITT Antarctic Services. And so at that time, that company liked to hire relatives of people who had already been down in Antarctica because, well, it's not like the most pleasant place to work. They figure if you are a relative of somebody who's worked down there, you have probably a better insight into what really goes on down there. And so if you want to do it, you probably really could handle it. So my brother told me, there's this job as a radio operator at the South Pole Station. Why don't you apply for it? And I remember I went in, I interviewed, they told me I had the job. And as I was walking down the hallway with them, as they told me I had the job, I went to the door to grab it, and I walked into a closet. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I did this after they told me I had the job, But it was a great experience. That's the sun is up during the summertime. It's up 24 hours a day. And so you walk out from a party, say, at 2 a.m, and it's bright sunshine and about 60 degrees below zero. So it's such a shocking, juxtaposition. But that's where I met my husband. So I always say I had to go to the end of the earth to meet that man.
Oh, so tell us real briefly about a South Pole romance.
Oh, he just swept me off my feet. I remember looking at him, and there's not many women down there, and so you could just, you don't have to say a word, and you could be as ugly as a frog, and there's lots of interest, right? But so all the guys had always kind of crowd forward and so forth, and whenever you'd go to the bar or something, but he'd hang back, and he might come up and say a word or two, but he wasn't like pushing himself on you. He's more like letting you be you. And after a while, I just couldn't help but notice this guy because he was just so different from all the other guys. And boy, well, 3 weeks after we met, we were engaged, and 3 weeks after that, we were married. So it was a whirlwind romance.
And how many years ago was that?
33.
Wow.
Yeah. Oh, really? It's the smartest decision I ever made, was to say yes to that man. It has really made my life wonderful.
Awesome. So let's go from there and talking about smart decisions. How did you end up then going back to school for engineering and wrapping your mind around, I can learn math, I can learn the sciences?
It was a scary process. I remember at first, so I was in the military. Mm-hmm. I got out, and I had the GI Bill, which paid for some of the schooling that I wanted to try to do. So I thought, well, I'm going to give this a try, because I'm supposed to be. I had always taken pride in, I travel to new places. I try to learn a new language. I'm supposed to be open to learning new things. And then I finally realized that, wait a minute, I am not doing that personally, because I'm not learning math and science. I've got that blocked off. Mm-hmm. So that first semester, I took remedial high school algebra. And if you look at the book, there's all these little dimples in the pages. And it's because I get so frustrated. I'd take a fork out, and I'd stab the book, with a fork. It almost seemed like it was deliberately written to make it not understandable. And I didn't know how the brain really works. And so I just didn't connect the dots of how when you're learning, sometimes when you get stuck, you step away, and that actually literally opens a new network, a more diffuse network. And that diffuse network is what does the background processing that allows you to solve it when you do return your attention to whatever it is.
We had on Dr. Amit Goswami yesterday. I'm not sure whose show is going to come out in which order. Nuclear physicist into quantum science, quantum mechanics. He's in the movie What the Bleep. And he has a term for this that he was telling me yesterday in yesterday's show. He calls it doobie-doobie-doo, which is to step in, high focus, do, and then B, step back completely away from it, and then come right back into it. And it's in that stepping away and coming back that things click.
That is exactly true. And sometimes if it's a difficult problem, you can't just step away for a little bit, for a few seconds and then come back and it clicks. You have to get your mind off it, go for a run, go to sleep, take a shower, do something really, because your mind tricks you. It's like continuing to try to focus on it because you're frustrated with it, but you really have to get your attention off it before it opens these other pathways. But the other thing, though, is this doobie-doo. One thing you can do to activate that a little bit more easily is to study in a coffee shop. Because when you're studying, you're focusing, do, and then there's a little clatter. And then that kind of draws you out of what you're studying. That's the B. And it temporarily opens those little pathways. So if you're learning something that's kind of difficult, like you're not memorizing a list, but rather you're trying to learn something like, how to put your irrigation system together or how your heart functions, then this kind of back and forth between looking really closely at one thing and stepping back to look at the systemic picture is really valuable as you're putting things together.
When I went to undergrad, I got through college with the TV show Night Court, which was on every night, 10:30 at 11 or night, I think before actually like Letterman. This was a long time ago. And I would dive, it's the Pomodoro technique, which you talk about later in your book. I would deep dive for 20, 25 minutes, read as much as I could, study, and then give me 5 minutes of Night Court or something else so that I can completely get my brain. And I still do that to this day. Even when I was deep diving into your book, I'm in, I'm out, I'll walk outside for a few minutes, I'll come back, but I'll chunk it in tiny little bits to get it in and then get the brain to relax because it's still working on it.
Exactly right. And notice one of the things you were doing is when you were stepping back, you were not doing something that was the same kind of mind work. You were activating different parts of your brain, either by going out, moving around. So you're not like working on writing a report and then going onto Twitter, which is still using the same verbal parts of your brain, and so you're not really getting a rest. So you were doing it really smart.
It's interesting because my wife Jessica, she was talking with me about this yesterday, and she was saying, you've been spending a lot of time researching this or that on the web in between your reading and stuff. Why don't you just go from doing your reading into doing some writing on your book and then back to reading? And I'm like, too close of a channel, and my brain will just crash or cram gears. It needs something that gets completely away from the topic.
That's right. That's exactly right. You don't realize it, but when you are focusing on something, you're actually blocking the networks you may need to be able to truly understand what you're focusing on. And it's only when you focus at first, that's like a preloading, and then back away so it accesses these other networks that do the background processing, and then return the focus. That's when it suddenly makes sense.
And I want to go back to you in school here. One of the ones that was fascinating to me that you talk about is how the neural connections are made. And you actually talk about a study with this. The neural connections are made when we go to sleep at night. So when we say, I've got to stay up studying, for instance, we could actually be doing more harm than good.
Yes. It amazes me because people don't understand the importance of sleep. I mean, they like know it because they've heard it a lot, but they don't know what sleep physically does. So they fool themselves into thinking, I'll stay up, I'll cram, and then I'll just go without sleep for the test the next day. Well, sleep does two important things. First of all, when you go to sleep, your brain cells shrink. That gives more space so the cerebral fluid can wash the toxins away that accumulate during the day. So it's like sleep is a house cleaning device. That's the first thing. But the second thing is when you learn something during the day and then go to sleep at night, then during the sleep process, that's when new synaptic connections form. And those new synaptic connections, they are the structure, the architecture of learning. So it isn't like all glop up there. And when you're learning something, it's just sort of glopping somehow. You're forming like a little crystal essence of a neural pattern, these physical connections, and they only form when you sleep. So that's why it's important to space out your learning. Learn a little bit every day over several days, because you can only grow so many synaptic connections of an evening. And so by spacing it out, you like build broader and broader pathways for those neural connections, and your learning is deeper and more well-structured.
When you talk about deeper and more well-structured, and I'm still coming back to your story, I'll just keep bringing us back, but this is fascinating to me. There's also the concept of, rather than trying to get it all at once, of repetition on that particular subject. Or there's something you talk about later in your book of actually drawing out a mind map around whatever you study, and how that puts it in a completely different way, and that helps build that lattice network.
It does. So Adam Koo, he's a brilliant man in Singapore who I profiled in the book, and Adam was a terrible student too. And one thing that terrible students often have in common is that they have uh, troubles with their attention. And so their attention kind of flickers place to place. And that does not help when you're really trying to be a good student. And so he was a terrible student. And so he went to a camp that was transformative for him. And they taught him some techniques. One of that was this mind mapping, drawing illustrations that connect ideas together. And that really helped him. Now, it's what's interesting to me is there's an idea called concept mapping. Mm-hmm. Concept mapping is you sort of draw a circle, and then you write in what your key idea is, and that leads to other ideas and makes connections. Now, research has shown that this is actually less effective than, like, if you're trying to understand a page of heavy-duty whatever, science or anything, you want to read the page, look away, mm-hmm. and then see what you can recall. And that is the best technique to actually build understanding. So concept mapping, drawing these circles with words in it and what, and trying to understand the page that way is not as effective as recall. But I think in Adam Koo's technique of drawing images, right, this mind mapping, so he's using images to help him remember and kind of connecting them together. That drawing images is really a powerful technique, and so I strongly recommend that.
You just threw me back into grad school, and I can remember I was struggling. I was actually really struggling with adult ADD at the time. I ended up going back on meds for a few years. I've rewired now since then completely. My focus is greater than it's ever been. But at the time, the way that I would pay attention was I would be, as the professor was talking, I'd be trying to think of what question I want to ask next. And I was online, and so I would be doing research at the same time to try to figure out questions to ask. And it just clicked. That's what I do now with my reading, is I read and I try to figure out what questions I can ask. And that's causing some sort of a network to be built, because in a sense, I'm learning how to teach at the same time I'm learning the material. So I'm coming at it from a second or third perspective at the same time.
I think that your approach of asking questions is a way of actively embracing the material instead of passively just sort of looking at it. Mm-hmm. And that active approaches to learning, where you're doing something active with your brain, has been shown to be profoundly helpful in really helping you to learn better. So in the course I just did, the MOOC Mindshift, which goes with the book Mindshift, I teach that with Terry Sanowski, the Francis Crick professor at the Salk Institute. But I use the episode of being when I was in Taiwan and tasting stinky cheese, right, stinky tofu, and to show how actively embracing something really sticks with you, and if it's not so active, it doesn't.
That makes sense. So let's go back to your education then. You've gone back to school. You're starting to learn how to learn. What were some of the techniques that you started to put in place?
A key one that I did was, oftentimes we will do a homework problem and then we turn it in. Mm-hmm. Well, you'd never just sing a song one time and say, yeah, I really know that song. And in some sense, when you're just doing a homework problem and turning it in, that's like singing a song once. I would take key homework problems, or like the key example problems that were really important and they were worked out. And they always say, don't just memorize these things. Mm-hmm. And that's true. So what I do instead is I'd look at the problem and I'd just see if I could work it cold actively, right, myself. And oftentimes, even though I just looked at the problem, couldn't do it. So I'd get as far as I could without peeking, use a little bit of hint if I needed to, and then I might try it again, just fresh. And I wouldn't cheat. I'd actually physically be working it out with a pencil. And then the next day, I would try it again, see if I could work it out cold. And eventually, when I'd done it enough times over several days, I could look at that problem and I'd go, to solve that problem, you go like this, 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 and it's not memorized. I'm actively pulling up from my brain what I know needs to be done to solve that problem. If you do that with several key problems from that, from whatever that chapter is, the section you're studying, you'll find that when you go and look at it again, you have a test, say, suddenly the test seems more doable because you've already got these key structures. So even if they throw something a little bit weird at you, you can go, but that's similar to this thing, which I do know very well. And what's funny is that I got these tricks for how to do this from learning Russian. The defense language has an excellent teaching program where you would sort of practice and start learning how to bring these things out of yourself, right? Instead of just, memorizing a bunch of verbiage. And so I was actually transferring the skills that I'd learned in learning Russian to learning in math and science.
That brings up such a hugely important theme, which is when we talk about shifting gears, learning a new skill, making a big shift at any point in life, when we think what we were doing before, I'm just going to have to throw that all out and start completely new, those are actually key elemental pieces to help you in that next stage of your life.
That's right. People, especially if they're looking at something that's quite different from whatever they're doing now. Mm-hmm. So let's say that you're a sports fanatic and you've been trying to break into the professional pro golf circuit, for example, and you, like many, don't make it. Now what do? So you decide to go into, for example, marketing. So you go into marketing, and what's interesting is your background in sports can actually be really, really helpful in marketing. And so you didn't realize it, but it can.
And that's huge. That gives people part of what you do. Well, let's talk about what's your mission in writing this book. You tell us what you were trying to do.
My mission was to encourage people through examples to show them that you can change a lot more than you think you can, that when you change, your past just isn't a bunch of empty baggage, that it can often be incredibly useful in ways you can't even imagine. And in fact, changing what you do, whether it's a small change or a large, it not only refreshes you as a human being, but it also brings creative new approaches into society. So it's a win-win all the way around. And even something as simple as developing learning more about photography, say, if you're interested in photography, or learning carpentry or quilting, and developing new passions and building on the passions you have can actually enhance what you're doing in your day-to-day career. And it also keeps you open and flexible to learning new things.
Very, very cool. On that note, let's go into one more story from you and your life of how you were doing this. What is a MOOC, and how did you start making a MOOC?
Oh, okay. So a MOOC is a massive open online course, and they can indeed be massive. Our MOOC, Learning How to Learn, has almost 2 million registered students, and it's kind of funny because I'd never done anything at all with videography, or, if you put a camera in my hand and said, here's the button, I could take a picture.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as having a studio and doing things with green screen or, gosh, video editing, I knew nothing about that. But I really wanted to convey some of these ideas about learning, and I knew that the video form could do it in a very straightforward way. And I was too much of a novice to realize that some of these techniques were considered very advanced, videography techniques. So I just didn't know that you weren't supposed to do them, and not as a novice anyway. I just kind of dove into it, and it worked.
I think that's actually a big, beautiful theme for people. And that's kind of the way that we've reinvented ourselves many times, is we haven't looked at what others are doing to know what's difficult and not. We went in with a completely empty cup and just didn't know any better.
Yes, and part of the reason the MOOC turned out so well is I hadn't, I didn't know how other people did it. And sometimes it can be valuable not to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah.
But for us, the state of MOOC making was so low at that time, and it still got a lot to learn, that one of my hobbies, I had to tell you. So probably about, I don't know, maybe 30 years ago, I was taking a class from this professor, and he was the worst professor I have ever had, period. That was worst. And so he was boxing himself in a corner with a mistaken equation, at the board. And the students in the back of the class were kind of kibitzing around talking about some television show. And he overheard it, and he whirled around and pulled himself up and said, "I never watch television." And I just looked at this guy and I thought, I never watched television either. Maybe I should start. And so I did. I started watching with my husband just a little bit of television.
Mm-hmm.
And what that did was kind of fuel the back of my mind with the power of what you can do with visual, video means. And in the last, 5-10 years, the price of video making material equipment has gone down so far that stuff that you normally couldn't have done for, without a budget of hundreds of thousands of dollars, you can really do. I mean, we made learning how to learn for $5,000 in our basement. And mostly, like whenever I got stuck, I just asked a high school kid. It's really not rocket science. And what's funny is, you go to some academicians and they're just like, oh, I wouldn't learn video editing. That takes too much time, and that's only for the experts to do. But actually, when you do it yourself, like now, I'm working with McMaster University, and they've got a great video editing group. And I think we all work synergistically beautifully together. But it really helps if you're willing to learn yourself some of the key attributes. Because even when I'm working with them, at least I know what they're talking about and what their constraints are.
Awesome. And it makes me think for ourselves and the business that we've built here. And each of the businesses, when you learn it yourself first and then you give the handover to the pros, you know what to look for, you know what to ask about, you have some sort of baseline understanding rather than just saying, here, you take it, you deal with it.
That's right. Because, sometimes, I hate to say it, but everyone who's doing something, it's your job. So you don't want to make your job look too easy because, and so sometimes people will give you, or you might give something to someone, and there's really simple ways to do it. And if they know that, they will do it in the simple ways. But if they know you don't know that, they'll produce something that looks beautiful, is enormously expensive, but actually from a pedagogical perspective doesn't do as well. I mean, there's an unnamed university that's a major university system that poured, I think it was $3 million into making a whole group of MOOCs. And and nobody watched them. They had like a couple hundred students. They were beautifully produced, but they were pretty boring, and nobody. So the video editors were really thrilled, right? Because they got a lot of money and they produced this stuff, and it looked great, but it was just totally boring. So the instructor being involved makes a big difference.
That makes total sense. And you weren't just, you went with a teleprompter to make it easier on yourself, but you also even scripted in jokes to make it more fun for people.
That's right. We got an email from this one 12-year-old girl, and she says, my mother said I could take this MOOC, Learning How to Learn, and I did better than my mother because I was not cramming like she did, and I learned how bad cramming actually is from the course. And she goes, I never understood that professors could be so witty. And I said, I just thought to myself, of course we were witty. We had a chance to script that witty in there, so it worked pretty well. But when you script, it doesn't waste any time. You're right on point. You've got beautiful imagery that you've thought out beforehand, and you could do things like duck and interact with things that are whizzing by you. Of course, it's all to be placed there post-production, right? But it gives you a way of being much more fun to watch and vibrant than if you're just sort of reading or kind of trying to speak off the cuff. A few people can do that, but most people can't do it as well as if they were really careful about scripting.
That makes sense. Let's go from there, and let's talk about some of the key concepts in your book and in your MOOC. First off, what do you mean learning isn't just studying?
We often equate learning with the stuff we do at school that we forget that learning involves all sorts of things. So I talk about the story of wonderful Claudia Meadows, for example, who she had severe depression, and she'd suffered from it most of her life. And she devised mechanisms. She began to learn how to overcome her depression. And it was a multifaceted learning process. And, it's never 100% successful. Nothing ever is. But it made an enormous difference in her life when she embraced the fact that she really could learn and change herself. And for her, exercise wasn't the only answer. But when she began an exercise program and began sort of a big program and just sort of trying to think more positively about what she was doing in her life. I found it myself tremendously inspiring to see how she could learn her way forward through depression and learn techniques that could really help her.
I thought it was fascinating because her story, she was a bus driver until a very significant accident, which thank God, in my opinion, thank God she saved somebody's life who was, for lack of another term, pulling a bonehead on the side of the road.
Exactly right.
But losing your job, that scary of an incident, I mean, that can put you into a tailspin when she was doing that job because she was depressed that you can't pull yourself out of. But she did.
That's right. She realized that after the accident that she was going to hit rock bottom because she had seen before when severe incidents would happen to her that would have an impact and send her into a tailspin. So she knew she was heading for a major tailspin. And she just realized that she had to start making some big changes in how she was living her life. She was seeing a professional before, and in some ways, I think she might have realized that part of what she was doing wasn't really going deep enough to really learn something new. And, because that's what she was really doing, was retraining her brain, setting new neural pathways. And it's just, I think it's a totally inspiring story that someone who is genetically, boom, she's just geared for it. You'd say, no way she's going to get out of this, she's been able to really improve her life dramatically by her own intentional ways of reprogramming her brain.
Woohoo! Before we started, you said there are different types of meditation we can use for the mind, and I want to definitely ask some more questions, brain oriented. But I really geek out on this stuff, so I'm wondering what you can tell us.
Well, it turns out that, and we talked just a little bit about this before, but there are two sort of completely different ways that your brain perceives the world or how it thinks. One is when you're focusing on anything. You're focused, right? And so you might call that the focused mode. And the other is when you're not focusing on anything, right? Which is really a hard state to fall into when you think about it because, well, if you think about it, you're focusing on something, right? But you do fall into this sort of what I call a diffuse mode, which is actually it's a series of neural resting states, the most prominent of which is the default mode network. And this second sort of diffuse mode of thinking is actually, you can see it in diffusion tensor imaging. It's a much broader network than the more tight task positive networks. So you're either in focus mode or you're in diffuse mode, but you're not in both modes at the same time unless you're like taking some mushrooms, which I'm not advocating here. But in any case, so focused, when you do focused type of meditation, like mantra meditation and so forth, that kind of meditation helps build those focus mode circuits. So if you have trouble with focusing, focus mode meditation, mantra meditation can really be helpful. Now, most types of meditation include this or are examples of focus mode type meditation. But there is another kind of meditation, and that is called open monitoring. And that's a family of meditation. So Vipassana and mindfulness, those kinds of meditation they're not, maybe at the beginning when you're first learning about it, you might focus some, but they're much broader. They enhance the sort of the operation of the diffuse network. And those kinds of meditation can enhance your creativity.
What is the importance, thank you for sharing on that, the importance of creativity when it comes to learning?
That is a great question, because you can be a super learner and not very creative. And part of it, I think, has to do with the kind of ways you are taught when you're growing up. If you're taught in ways that continually emphasize focus all the time, it's hard for you to, it is literally harder for you to access those broader networks of diffuse mode that are involved in creativity. So, but if you're trying to solve problems, like, this is such a complex question to answer, but some kinds of problems like mathematical problems and so forth, they can be more like they have closed solutions. So you can get really, really good at solving those kinds of problems. And then when you're presented with this idea of, well, hey, here's an airplane tire. I want you to come up with a good method for me to be able to see whether there are blisters in the rim of this airplane tire that might cause a wreck. And I want you to be able to do it cheaply and without actually tearing the tire open. Now, come up with creative ways to do that. Well, that's not a typical closed math problem.
Yeah.
You have to kind of step back and look at that. And so certain ways of education can enhance, your ability to step back and look at these more open kinds of problems. So I sometimes I think that right now the education in the East, more Asian approaches and more Western approaches, they each emphasize different things, and that the best approach would be a melding of both approaches.
Thank you. From there, can we learn to change or how would you define a mind shift, and can we do that at any age?
Mindshift is the change, your own internal change in your perspective that occurs through learning. So it's the realization that you can do more than you think you can, and actually doing that. Just as I sort of mind shifted from math phobe to becoming an engineer. And you can do this really at any age. It takes time to learn something difficult or that's new. The thing is, you may think, oh, I've got no ability to do something like this. And I think our only real restraint is actually the older we get, the more things we have going on in our lives. And so it makes it a little more difficult to get the time we would need to, for example, learn a new language or start learning some mathematics at a deeper level than whatever our level is. But absolutely, I mean, there's plenty of evidence from neuroscience that you can continue learning right up until your deathbed. So and in fact, it's really healthy for you. It extends your life if you keep learning.
You talk about in the book something about people who read books, and I was excited to find this one, something like 23% longer, or maybe 23% fewer people died, something like that, during this study while reading books.
Right. And what was funny to me is it's reading books that extends your lifetime. It's not, so you tend to think, well, it's just the reading process. So if I go read, read a magazine or read something on the web, that'll do the same thing. No, it's reading books that actually does it. So that's the powerful thing that you're doing, is encouraging people to step back and read books, because I think it also induces a sort of inner peace and calmness. You have to tune other things out and really just sort of get into the flow of what that author is saying and how they're thinking. And it's sort of akin almost to meditation in a way. And I think it's really healthy for you. And the evidence shows it really is healthy for you.
Woohoo! We love to give homework assignments to people. I love to give homework assignments to people so that they're not just listening to this, so they're not just reading a book. And everybody, you're going to want to get her book, and we'll tell you where in a second. But I love to give homework assignments so that people can take an active approach. So what one homework assignment would you give people today to start their own mind shift process?
I would say to write a few sentences down about where you are in your life of learning, right? Or your life, because your life has been learned to get there. Just a few sentences, and then describe where would you like to go and what ways might you help yourself get there. Just those few ideas or sketching those things out can give you a sense of what's going on? Where am I going? Why am I going? There's an exercise that's akin to that on the Mindshift MOOC. And what's great about that is that when you post there, you get feedback from other posters from all around the world. So it's kind of a neat thing.
Cool. So on that note, where can people go to find your beautiful book and to find your MOOC?
Oh, If they go to my website at barbaraoakley.com, they'll see links to the Mindshift book, the Mindshift MOOC, and my previous book, Mind for Numbers, which is actually a general book about learning, and the MOOC, Learning How to Learn, which is the world's most popular MOOC. And so they'll find all those things there. And the book Mindshift, of course, is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all those kind of good things.
Awesome. And I've got to ask, because I asked you right before the show, and I was dumbfounded by this, the cost of your MOOC.
Oh, the MOOC is actually free. So there's just great material there. If you want to get a certificate, there's a modest fee, but virtually all of the course materials are available, so you can just watch all the videos, take the tests and so forth, and teach yourself more about learning and more about your life.
Very, very cool. What advice would you give to parents today to help their kids with learning?
That's a good question. For me, I just encouraged our kids to get a little bit extra math, because extra math can help you. It can open a lot of career doors for you. So, it's more like if you're non-math, non-technical, you've got maybe a third of the world available career-wise. And if you're plus math and technical with whatever else you've got, then you've got the whole world available for you. So I'd say just encourage a little bit of extra practice with math, and that'll be helpful.
And something I guess I've got to address, it's in your book, so much great stuff in your book, but one is about girls and math, and it's not what we used to think it was.
Oh, yes. So what's the effect of testosterone on male and female development during the early years? You tend to think, wow, well, testosterone is going to have some effect on math and science ability, and actually it has zero effect on math and science. Boys and girls are pretty much they've got pretty much the same abilities in math and science. Where testosterone does have an effect is it delays boys' verbal development. And girls who have less testosterone, their verbal development advances, right? So a girl will look inside herself, so let's say she's 8 years old, and on average, and this is totally on average, she'll say, hey, I'm better at verbal stuff than I am at math stuff, even though she's just the same in her math abilities as a little boy of that age. So she'll say, I'll go as she matures, that kind of sets in her mind. She's better verbally. And then when we tell her, follow your passion, well, passions develop about what you're good at. And she thinks, I'm better at verbal things, so I'll go verbally, even though she has the same math abilities as a boy of her age. The boy, on the other hand, is going, man, I'm just not very good verbally. So I'm better at quantitative sort of things. So even though his quantitative abilities are the same as that of the girl of that age, but he knows inside that he's better at math. So the girl can say, I'm better at verbal. The boy says, I'm better at math. Each is right only when looking at themselves, and off they go into their respective directions, irrespective of the fact that they're both similarly good at and capable of math and science. So I think one of the biggest disservices we do, and it's all well-meaning, is to say, follow your passions in learning instead of broaden your passions in learning, right? Learn even the things that, you may not feel like you're as good at, or they doesn't come so easily for you. And I think that's a great way to approach learning.
I love that, because it means that, I don't know why pepper is popping into my head, but when you pepper the situation when you've learning from so many different degrees and angles, that whatever you're focused on, you're now going to bring in from a multidisciplined approach, and you're going to see things from a completely different way rather than just focusing on where you want to go or the task at hand.
That is so true. Let's say that, sort of a related example of this. Let's say you're an adult and you decide you really want to learn about investing. So you read virtually every book you can on investing. Well, what you're not thinking about is everybody else is reading the same books on investing. And if you just dabble a little bit in a few things that are completely different, you'll bring through metaphor. You'll be reading something on horse racing like in the 1930s or something, and it'll strike an idea for you that will be different about investing than what other people are doing. And you can be more creative and more perceptive just by being a little more open instead of just single-minded about what you're learning.
I love it. And we didn't really have time to go there today. Another reason to get the book. But you talk about second skilling, and you talk about the system in Singapore and tea learning and pie learning and mushrooms. And we were joking about mushrooms earlier. But if you're going to go a different direction in your life and you think, well, there's all this competition over there, I can't go there because that's not my area of expertise. Coming from an outside perspective, from a very different perspective, I believe can actually be your advantage.
That's right. And even historian of science Thomas Kuhn has found that big breakthroughs and creative ideas, really good work is done by two different groups of people. One are really young people who haven't yet been indoctrinated into what the standard view of things are. But the second are people who've come from a different career, who've changed their career paths. They bring these fresh perspectives. It's almost like you're a bumblebee pollinating with new ideas, and you feel like, oh, I'm just a bumblebee. I'm just like crashing around into things. I'm not nearly as good as these other people who are, like airplanes going directly to their path. But you've got, because of your background, even though it feels like maybe a waste or just something that you'll never use, you will bring fresh insights into whatever you're doing that can be enormously helpful, actually, in the job itself.
Woohoo! Two last questions for you. First off, being the best bumblebee you can be, what personally brings you the greatest happiness, or what I call the woohoo factor?
Oh, I think it's hearing from people who have been helped by learning about these very simple ideas, that just seeing that they make an enormous difference in people's lives. So it's, these new methods of online learning coupled with book writing are having an impact, allow good ideas to percolate amongst society in a way they've never been able to percolate before. And it just makes you feel good to know that you've really been a help for other people in a way that, hasn't been possible for people to do before.
And you have, by my understanding, by the time this is coming out right now, you've helped almost 2 million people with your massive online class.
That's right. It's just amazing that something you make in your basement can reach so many people. And I have to, there are some really great platforms out there too that have helped make this possible. So, for example, I work with Coursera, which has fantastic courses for people to, whether you're interested in learning about medieval manuscripts or you're interested in learning about the Python programming languages, they've got some really great courses out there. There's also an outfit called Class Central, and if you just Google it, you can search by subject matter for all sorts of MOOCs that can be whatever subject you're interested in. And but universities are valuable in their approaches to online learning, but I think that individual people can have great insights outside of the conventional academic pathway. And, that's sort of what our MOOC is doing as well. We're not using the conventional approaches. And so that is really encouraging for folks, I think, who are not working in the traditional academic approaches, but who have great material and really want to help others.
Woohoo! I'm so glad I spoke to you today. And if there's one overarching theme that I'm really wanting to get across to people, and I'm seeing so clearly now, is to sign up for a course, dive into something, expand your life, challenge yourself at any point that you can start learning again. How little time can we start diving into something and start to do this for ourselves?
Oh, well, I mean, you can start anytime. And the nice thing is you don't have to, spend 10 hours a day or give up your life and enroll in a university or something like that. You can just dive right into it and go for it. And then tailor it to whatever time you have available.
Thank you. Any last words of wisdom you want to share with people today?
Don't just follow your passion, broaden that passion.
Ooh, I like it. Thank you so much, Barb. This has been fantastic. This has been a huge motivation for us as well. As I was discussing off air, we're working on a book right now, and why not put together an online program with that as well? So I'm going to be thinking about you often. I'm going to be watching and learning from your MOOC as well. This has been such a true honor and a treat.
Oh, it's been really an honor. You are the greatest. It's just been so fun being on the show, and you ask really good questions that are kind of tough too. So it's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Well, we got to have fun. So for everyone out there, this is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun, get Mindshift, and discover your own hidden potential, and shine bright. Woohoo! Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!